Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is Charmed Season 4, Episode 5, A Night to Remember. The episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in the episode. So the episode begins with Piper entering Prue's room, where her outfit that she was going to wear the next day was already laid out on the bed. Her jewelry as well, and takes her jacket, puts it on, sits in the room for a while before leaving and heading downstairs to the kitchen. Phoebe then comes in shortly after with wet hair, talking about how, they're living in a practically medieval situation since they can't use electricity in the house because anytime that they do so, the shocker demon attacks them from the outlets or from the devices, and that they really need Paige there, but she's across town. Phoebe then goes to try to call Paige, however, then the shocker demon comes out of the cordless phone and attacks them, which prompts them then to head over to Paige's house. Paige, meanwhile, is with Glenn, who is somebody that she is in an on and off again relationship with, because he travels frequently. So when he's in town, they're together. When he leaves town, they see other people. And she's telling him about a childhood fairy tale about an evil enchantress who kidnaps the prince's true love, casts a spell on him to make him think she's his true love, conceives an heir, and takes over the kingdom. And once she has the heir born, kills the prince and rules as regent, basically, over the kingdom in evilness and darkness. Then, of course, the sisters barge in and want her help. Paige, of course, is embarrassed because she's been caught in bed with a guy. And then Piper basically springs, "You should move in with us," because obviously fighting demons when you live across town is a bad thing. However, Paige, of course, refuses because one, it was sprung on her, and two, they're still newly knowing each other. Anyways, she kicks them out. Then she comes over to the house to look in the Book of Shadows to look for her fairy tale. Once again, the prospect of moving in is brought up, and she again refuses, but she does manage to find the entry on the evil enchantress and the spell that she used to bind the prince, which, when she says out loud, actually brings the prince into the present to meet her, and then she basically leaves for work while Piper and Phoebe are left dealing with the prince, but also the shocker demon. And when they're distracted by the shocker demon, the prince gets out into the real world and ends up finding Paige at work, which she then quickly makes an excuse that she's working with the Renaissance Fair for an orphanage, and quickly gets him out, takes him to her apartment. Meanwhile, back at the manor, the evil enchantress has followed the prince to the present and is there to basically attack the sisters to try to find the prince. And as she is looking for the prince, she does find a picture of Paige, especially when Paige's boss mistakes her for Paige and realizes that Paige is her future self, in a different past life. The sisters come to Paige's apartment and warn her that the evil enchantress is there, but she, instead of working together, decides she can go it alone and leaves the apartment on her own, which of course only ends with her being defeated by the evil enchantress, who then is able to return to the apartment and take her prince to the past again, which Piper and Phoebe follow her through, which has them end up chained to the wall while Lady Julia, who is the prince's true love, is in a cell right across from them. Paige then, of course, is healed by Leo, returns to her apartment in time to see Phoebe jumping through the portal just before it closes. Leo gives her a pep talk about how she's a powerful witch. Look at the enchantress. That power is still within you, even if your powers are different now and you've become good now. Like, you have always been powerful. You still are. She then rewords the spell to bring her to the prince instead of the prince to her. This opens another portal. Her and Leo go through. She then faces the Enchantress while Leo frees Piper and Phoebe, who then come in and are able to bind the Enchantress's powers before they allow Lady Julia in, who breaks the evil Enchantress's curse with a kiss of true love. And then they all return to the present and decide that Paige is going to move in to Prue's old room, and at the end of the episode, we see her having redecorated the room, and then they vanquish the Shocker Demon as a knock on the door happens, and Paige reveals that it's Glenn, who had asked her to go to Australia with him, but she's decided to stay as there's no lacking in adventure right there at home. And that is the end of the episode. So now that we have been reminded what happened in the episode, we'll now rank the episode on our mostly objective ranking and our personal ranking lists. So we start, as always, with our mostly objective rank values. And there were quite a few that applied to this episode, but I'm going to start with some honorable mentions that I didn't end up taking points for, but I still felt were worth noting. So, negative messaging or behavior. Obviously, there was the casting of a love spell, which of course bypasses consent, which is of course evil. However, the character who did that is evil, and typically if it's something that is considered to be within expectations of that character, like they are a villain, so they are obviously going to do villainous things, I typically don't take points for it because it's just expected behavior of the character. So I didn't take any points for that. The other one, of course, was the Prince attacking a garbage truck with his sword and then threatening the driver. And on the one hand, this is obviously negative behavior. You're threatening a citizen, you're attacking the garbage truck, which could have caused property damage, etc. But at the same time, you have to consider the context, and this is a guy who's been pulled out of his own time, has no clue what's happening, and is only trying to follow the will of the spell that he is under. So he's not really in full control of his actions, nor does he really have the knowledge to be able to know he's doing something negative. And therefore, I also decided not to take points for it, but I do want to acknowledge that these things did occur. I just think that in the context of the episode, they are reasonable and within expectations of the character's level of knowledge slash moral compass. So, there were no negative points for this episode. There could have been, but I used my bias and judgment to say there aren't any. And instead, we have our positive points. So, starting off, we have our single episode supporting character introductions, which were worth 1 point each, and this, of course, is the Prince and Lady Julia, his true love. We also got the introduction of a multi-episode supporting character introduction, which is Paige's on-again, off-again lover, Glenn Belland, who is there for a couple of days and is staying with Paige in her apartment, or at least one night he stayed with Paige in her apartment, where she tells him the story, and then they wake up the next morning before she goes to work. Because he does recur, he is also worth being a supporting relationship development, which is, of course, the introduction that Glenn and Paige do have a history, have been on and off again, that the feelings are strong enough that he would like her to travel with him, but ultimately she does decide to stay because she has responsibilities, but they do end on good terms, as it is a frequent occurrence that he will leave to travel and that's when their relationship will end, but then they'll pick up right away again when he returns back. So both of those things are worth 2 points each, bringing us up to 6 points so far. Then bringing us up to 10 points is the multi-season main character development, which is that Paige does move into the manor at the end of the episode. Obviously, at the first, she refuses because they're asking her for the wrong reasons. They're not asking her as a sister or because they're ready, but because the danger that the Source and other demons pose is leading to inconveniences and troubles. So at first she refuses, but by the end of the episode, they've come together, they've learned to work together more. Paige has realized she can't go it alone every time because obviously she's defeated by the Enchantress, and then when she does team up with her sisters, they do defeat the Enchantress. And so it also doesn't hurt that the Enchantress did set her apartment on fire and damage it greatly before they went into the past, so she kind of has to move in. But I think we're supposed to like the fact that they have become a little closer sisters, at least realize that they do have, that kind of bond of sorts, and so that is why she's moving in. But really, it's probably because she can't get her security deposit back and her apartment is kind of ruined. Then we had the last 4 points bringing us to 14 for this episode, and that is the fact that Paige's past life is revealed to be the evil Enchantress, who again comes back to the present, and then they go into the past to defeat fully before returning again back to the present. And as we are over 10 and the maximum score possible is a 10 for our mostly objective ranking, this episode is a 10 out of 10. So a quick reminder that when more than one episode on our mostly objective ranking has the same score, we rank it in episode order, bringing our mostly objective ranking so far to, in first, Charmed Again, second, Hell Hath No Fury, Enter the Demon, This Episode A Night to Remember is in fourth, and then Size Matters is last place so far. Now for my personal ranking, I did want to note that I had completely forgotten about the fact that there have been past lives noted in previous episodes. Last week's episode dealt with limbo and reincarnation, and I had a bit of a confusion about how that played into the fact that there were spirits, especially spirits from like centuries past, such as Melinda Warren, who are able to be summoned, meaning that they hadn't been recycled into new people because they're still able to be summoned, so they're presumably in some sort of afterlife, and how does that mix in with reincarnation? And I wondered if there were options. And this episode once again brings that back because in Pardon My Past, Phoebe dealt with a past life, and her sisters were in that past life as well as cousins in like the 20s. So we did deal with that in the past, that it does seem like they do have the option for reincarnation, but clearly not all of them do, since they can also be some summonable spirits as well. So potentially, based on what I'm remembering from what's been said before, in the last one of Pardon My Past, Leo had noted how their souls were reincarnated and were growing and evolving until they were ready to become the Charmed Ones. So I'm wondering if it's a path of your soul continues to be reincarnated until it reaches its destined conclusion, and then after that you just go to the afterlife where you are summonable by the people in the present, such as Graham's, their mother Patty, and Melinda Warren, their ancestor, was, as well as some of the other innocents that they have summoned the ghosts of before. But I had forgotten that there were past lives for the sisters as well, so basically what I'm trying to say is I'm not as confused as I was then, though I still am confused because they never really clarify exactly what leads to reincarnation and having a past life versus a present life versus, being hanging out so that they can be summoned, etc. So I'm still confused, but I'm a little less confused because I now remember that past lives did exist, as this episode does focus on Paige's past life as the evil Enchantress, and her soul has the memory of it in a subconscious way, as she had created this fairy tale when she was very, very young, and that it had always stuck with her because it wasn't actually a fairy tale that she created, but a memory of her past life as the evil Enchantress. I also wanted to point out that I thought the Enchantress's powers were really cool. Probably takes too much special effects effort to have them like be permanently Paige's powers, so they brought them in for like this brief episode, which I thought was fun. I also like how when she went into the past, because they have the same soul, just in different time periods, Paige was able to use the Enchantress's powers in the past, where she wasn't able to use her own powers there because they were technically one and the same, which I thought was great. I did like the little instances of comedy where like the prince was fighting against the truck and whatnot. However, when the prince does come into the office, I did feel like there was some secondhand embarrassment that was happening. Um, and even when he was like fighting the truck, while it was funny, it also was a little bit secondhand embarrassing. And even if it's secondhand, I don't like the feeling of embarrassment. So for me, that was a bit of a flaw. But otherwise, I felt like the entire episode was great. The Shocker Demon, it kind of fell by the wayside, but at the same time, it also did have an impact at several points throughout the episode, distracting the sisters so the prince could leave, being the catalyst that gets Piper and then by extension Phoebe to want Paige to move in with them because it's causing trouble at the manor. Um, Attacking Paige at work, which is what gets her to stop running away from the prince and bring him back to her apartment because he saves her from the Shocker Demon at the workplace. And then, of course, at the end to show that it's come full circle, and then they use the power of 3 to defeat the Shocker Demon. So, as much as it is kind of not the most memorable part of the episode, I do feel like it's not a detractor because it does play a role throughout the episode at multiple points. And then the whole medieval theme is totally within my personal aesthetic and drama. Like, I loved how Paige looked as the evil enchantress. I thought that was great. I like how she used a deeper voice to play the evil enchantress to kind of show a differentiation between the two. I also liked, well, the outfit obviously was great. I already said that, but also just the overall medieval aesthetic. I do like historical fantasies. They are always among my favorite genres, so I did in fact really enjoy this episode for that reason as well. And again, like all of the plots, the main plot, the subplots were all amazing. The only flaw that I felt was a thing was that few instances of secondhand embarrassment, which I only detracted 1 point for, which gave this a 9 out of 10 ranking as an episode. So in first we have Hell Hath No Fury. Charmed again. This episode, A Night to Remember, is in third so far. And then we had Size Matters and Enter the Demon in fifth. And so we now come to our series ranking so far. And a reminder of the standings so far on Mostly Objective Ranking. We have Season 3 in first place with 76.36%. Season 2 in second, 75%. Season 1 is in third with 73.18%. And Season 4 so far has 48 out of 210. On the personal side, we had Season 3 in first place with 76.82%, Season 1 in second with 71.5%, and then Season 2 is currently in last place with 56.82%. Season 4 so far has 39 out of a possible 210. So with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Charmed Season 4, Episode 5, A Night to Remember. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.